In this episode of the Awaken Podcast, we're going to talk about how to create change in your life in a way that feels natural, aligned with your truth, and empowering. We know that change is the only constant in life, and yet when it comes up, it can feel overwhelming or terrifying. We may not know where to begin. And if we resist change, it can create a lot of unhappiness and frustration. So we're going to go into the depths of how to navigate change so that you feel unstuck, liberated, inspired, and free. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Awaken Podcast,
where we share practical spirituality for modern living.
Join us as we dive deep into conversations about healing and transformation.
Let's go. Let's get it. Another episode.
I'm excited.
You know how we do it. We've got our cacaos. If you're tuning in at home, if you've got a cacao, a matcha, a tea, or any other beverage that you like, then join us.
Let's take a deep breath together. You can close down your eyes if you want to. Exhale, sigh it out. Gently breathe and bring your focus to your intention.
My intention today is to bring the vibes and to support anyone who might be struggling or unhappy or feeling stuck in their life, and to provide hope and motivation and inspiration that no matter how they're feeling, they can meet themselves exactly where they are and start there.
Love that. I'll add to that, I hope that this conversation will inspire people to remember that so much of the joy that we're seeking outside of ourselves is actually an inside job. We just forget.
So true.
And so let's get into that. Let's take our power back. Let's go deep and let's get inspired.
Well, I want to start with, it doesn't matter what stage you're at, because you can get stuck and feel unhappy at any level of the game. We work with clients who are just starting their journey of personal development and healing and maybe have a startup business, all the way to clients who are well established, who are self-made millionaires and even billionaires, and they feel stuck and unhappy too. So
we work with people of all different ages. We work with people who have kids, who don't have kids, who live in all different cultures, so many different people. And it's relevant to all of humanity, really. This is universal truth.
Totally. But I think one of the things that we were talking about before this conversation with social media is it's so easy to get distracted and compare ourselves to other people's lives. So we can look at people who we think are further ahead and we think that they've got it all figured out and they're living this highlight reel, and then we feel shitty about ourselves and we think that we've got all this work to do and that, why is my life not this amazing life that I see these other people living? But to remember, each of us have our own unique struggles. Like, people are showing you their highlight reel. It's not their actual real life reality.
So
it's
true.
really important to remember.
Yeah, and I think another part of this is to realize that just because people put out the good times doesn't mean that those good times didn't come with challenges. And I think we can sit there on the sidelines and assume they have it so easy. And something I would love to talk with you more about to begin this conversation is our relationship to adversity and challenges and hard times. Because I can remember for a really long time, I resisted being uncomfortable. And if anything felt difficult in my life, I would associate that with being a victim, being hard done by. I would feel sorry for myself. And in the process of transforming my relationship with challenges, I have actually reclaimed a lot of lost happiness. So let's talk about it. What do you see when it comes to how people relate to adversity?
Well, we get messages from people all the time. This is another thing that we were speaking about before the podcast. We literally get messages daily from people who are unhappy, who are struggling, who are going through it, and they're looking for a way out. And we were there. We know all about that. That's why we're so passionate about what we do, because we've lived that life where we were struggling and disconnected from our own power and feeling so unhappy And we had to find a way out, and we did. And that's why we're here even having this conversation today. So I think for me, the first thing was really acknowledging where I was, because for so many people, they can run, numb, distract themselves, and suppress how they're actually feeling. So acknowledging how you're feeling is the number one key. That's the starting point, right? Just getting out a piece of paper, your journal, and a pen, and starting to take radical responsibility for how you're feeling and put it on paper.
I
It
agree.
really helps to
Yeah.
like get everything out of your head, out of your heart, and put it all on paper. That's a really good starting point.
Something that we've been doing for, I guess, a decade or more is, like you just said, getting a journal and then listing out every single thing that's bothering us. So I know for myself that being able to look at it objectively on the page helps so much
It does.
to organize my thoughts, because when I've got a lot of things that are piling up and bothering me, and I can say that for most people who are feeling unhappy, it's not just one thing. There is an accumulation of things that are weighing you down
Yep.
and creating that sense of burden and lack of inspiration. And so when you start to actually put them on the page, one item, one situation, one dynamic at a time, then you can start to get a bit more clarity about what you're dealing with. Because I think when it's all smushed together, it just feels overwhelming. Like you don't even know where to begin with organizing your life and creating a breakthrough. So again, I think that's a really important step. Don't skip it. If you're watching this, you can even pause the podcast, get a page, and just bullet point, write down everything that you can think of right now that's bothering you, weighing you down, making you sad, annoyed, pissed off, angry, frustrated, stuck, low vibe, shame, like any negative emotion that you resonate with right now that is there, get it out on the page.
Yeah. This self-reflection piece is the beginning stage of acknowledging exactly where you're at. And as we begin to acknowledge exactly where we are, our starting point, then we can start to do something about it, right? This is uncomfortable. If you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling unhappy, if you're not where you want to be, yes, it might be uncomfortable to reflect on the areas of your life where things are not where you want them to be, but the truth sets you free. And it's so important to do the work. And this is the work. This is the starting point. So if you're at home and you've got your journal out and you need to pause the video to do this practice now, we highly encourage you to do that. And it doesn't have to be this big drawn out thing. Like Hala said, you can simply write down all the things that are weighing on you, that are bothering you, the areas that you feel stuck, reflecting on anything that might be lowering your vibration. And I guarantee once you do that practice, even just from writing things down, it's going to start the process of you shifting some energy.
So true. Okay, so this brings me to another point of why this practice is so important, and that is how we relate to our own emotions. I can recall so many times, more than I can count, where I have felt even more unhappy because I'm feeling a negative emotion. So the very fact that I'm feeling a negative emotion causes me misery. And it just spirals and makes it worse. And then I'll try to escape the feelings. I'll try to do something to make myself temporarily feel better, AKA find a coping mechanism. And it doesn't work, and it perpetuates the cycle of inner conflict where it's like, why do I feel this way? I don't want to feel this. What's wrong with me? And on it goes. And so when I was saying about the importance of transforming our relationship to challenges and adversity, I think looking at our relationship to our own negative emotions and feelings in general is a really powerful practice, because your emotions can become feedback. And instead of thinking of them as something that's in the way, what if they're actually a part of showing you the way? Because they're showing you how you feel about things that might need to be changed.
Yeah, that's so true. In our last podcast, we spoke about the way. And what if the challenge was the way, or the negative emotions was a part of the way? Like you said, our emotions can be a doorway into connection to more information. Our emotional body is connected to our energetic or spiritual body. So as we access our emotions and we give ourselves permission to feel them and we don't run from them, it's like we can access a package of information about how we're truly feeling in life and the things that have been weighing on us, and that's a practice, right? Being willing to sit in the fire of discomfort of your own emotions and move through them. We talk about this all the time, but emotions can move quite quickly. It's only when we're looping in the story and we're playing those old disempowering narratives over and over and over again that we feel stuck. But if we can just be with the raw emotion of how we're feeling, then we can actually move that energy and emotion pretty quickly.
Mm. And I think what many people don't realize is that they are afraid to sit with the feelings.
Mm.
And it is so simple, but it isn't easy. And many of us have been taught from a really young age not to fully feel our feelings. And that's been demonstrated to us by our caregivers, by our peers. Human beings are really, really good at avoiding emotions. And so if you are one of the brave ones who's like, okay, I've got to make this my work to face the challenge and be with the adversity of sitting in the fire and feeling these feelings, kudos to you, because it will create so many breakthroughs in your life, but it is something that so many people avoid. So really celebrate yourself for being willing to show up and do those hard things. And it's something that is going to come up again and again and again because we are emotional humans, we're
Totally.
feeling beings. And you're going to have these choice points where you either feel or you resist. You either face the feedback that's arising through your emotional body and listen and learn and be your own ally, or you perpetuate this inner conflict and then it exacerbates how you feel and then it leads into misaligned actions in your life. So fast forwarding a little bit beyond the emotional side of things, let's talk about what we notice within ourselves and also with clients when resistance takes over and people aren't feeling their feelings and what that does in our lives. Because I know that there are some people that are listening right now who are like, I'm not happy and I don't really understand why. And maybe they've done the list and there's a whole bunch of things that are on there, but their life circumstances are feeling overwhelming and there's this resistance and I don't know what to do and I'm stuck.
Yeah. Usually those feelings will come from self-doubt or fear or the parts of us that don't believe that it's possible to make positive changes, or we just feel overwhelmed, or like you said, we don't know where to start. But if we remind ourselves that the challenge is the way, then that's our starting point, right? Like if we know that there's an area of our life that there's things that we can do, and we know what those things are. They might feel scary, they might feel overwhelming, but there's tangible steps that we can take. I think a lot of people don't move forward because they feel overwhelmed. Like you said, it all just feels too much, too fast, too soon. It's too big. So breaking things down into really small steps can be helpful. Like, what's the next aligned action step you can take? Like, just what's the next one thing that you can do to support yourself to move forward? Maybe for you, it's like sitting with those emotions, like we said, like that's your next step. Like, I'm going to have to face off with this anger that I'm feeling, or this hurt, or this sadness. Like, I'm going to have to be with it. That's my next step. And through that, a shift will happen and you'll start to find clarity. But if you're constantly running from your emotions, or if you're using coping mechanisms to numb or to distract yourself from how you're truly feeling, then the next step is going to be to face off with how you're actually feeling. So many people get stuck in that loop of seeking temporary pleasure to find relief with what they're feeling. using some sort of coping mechanism. But as we all know, we've been through this a million times, that just gives you some sort of temporary relief. It's not an actual fix to the challenges that you've got going on in your life. It might give you a temporary sense of pleasure or relief, but it doesn't last. Then you're left with the challenges and the suppressed feelings and emotions that you haven't dealt with. So I think that's the starting point. Like you said, we've got this list, we're writing things down, we're getting clarity around where we feel stuck and unhappy, and then knowing that the challenge is the way. So we're giving ourselves permission to sit with our emotions and to move through them. This is not just about wallowing in your feelings. This is like the work, right? We sit in the fire of discomfort of what we're feeling and we move through it. And we have many tools that we use, within our app that we support people with doing this, but this is a part of the work. Some people will spend their entire life avoiding, running, numbing, and staying in that cycle of seeking temporary relief to mask how they're actually feeling. And we all know it doesn't lead to progress. It doesn't lead to change.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one of the add-ons to the little assignment that we've already given you all is, once you've written down the things that are bringing up unhappiness or negative emotions, you can add on to that list. Maybe it's a column or on another page, and you can get more specific about what you're feeling related to that particular situation or dynamic or whatever it is that's going on that you've written down. Getting more clear on the deeper feelings about it can help to bring more clarity. And then the next stage after that is to look at if there are any things that you can do to move energy in that area. For example, you touched on sitting with it. Maybe it's through meditation or breath work, maybe doing a class in the app. We've got classes to help you process anger, sadness, grief, and on and on. Maybe though, another thing that you might write there is a specific action that you need to take on something that you've been procrastinating or avoiding. And this brings me to another layer of it, which is when it comes to the action that we need to take in order to relieve ourselves of a feeling. Okay, so let's say as an example that I have had a difficult situation with a family member and it's causing me stress and I'm feeling really down about it. That might be something that I need to first of all acknowledge, like, hey, I'm actually feeling sad, stressed, disappointed. What are the specific emotions that I'm feeling about that thing? What am I telling myself? What are the thoughts that I am telling myself about this situation? For example, it might be, I'm on my own. I feel like people don't understand me. I feel really disrespected in this situation, whatever it may be.
Well, that's the next level of journaling. So there's what happens and then there's what we make it mean.
Yes.
So that's the next key piece. Like you said, when you're writing down how you're feeling, what are you making it mean?
And from there, we get to start to go to the layer beyond that, which is what is possible, or what is this showing me that I need to do? And it might be that I'm avoiding having a conversation with that person. And so then this is the next layer or level after that, which is, if I was to do that thing, what does that bring up for me? Because oftentimes when we feel unhappy or stuck, we're choosing to suffer in one way to avoid another kind of suffering. For example, there might be fear that you're avoiding. Like, it would scare me, or it would feel really, really vulnerable to have that conversation, or, then I would have to put my ego to the side and be agreeable when I feel like I just want to defend myself. It could be a completely different situation. Let's say there's a goal that you're going after and you realize that you feel really crap about yourself. You've been avoiding doing this thing. You realize, you know what, I've been lazy lately. I haven't been taking care of my health. There's things that I need to do. But when I look at actually doing those things, it brings up exhaustion. Like, just the thought of it, I feel overwhelmed and exhausted and like I can't be bothered and I don't know where to start. So I'd just rather do nothing. And so we need to face the potential emotions and how we're relating to the things that would create the breakthrough, and then decide. Because something that I've seen with myself and with every single client that I have coached and mentored through these stages of change is that there comes a point where staying the same and looping in the misery feels so much worse than just ripping the Band-Aid and doing the hard thing.
Yeah, so true. So let's break down the stages of change for everyone tuning in at home, because this is a really helpful model to understand where you might be right now. It gives you something really practical to reflect on, and from there you can start to write down where you've been at. Because once you identify it again, then you can do something about it. So let's go. Stage number 1 is pre-contemplation. So if you're in pre-contemplation, you don't realize that there's a problem. You are defending your own limitations. If someone points something out, you're not willing to take responsibility for it. You're not willing to make a change in that area, and you don't see it as a problem. So a prime example of this is you might have someone in your life, a loved one, who is using a really harmful coping mechanism that's causing them harm, and it's become an issue. It's something that they don't have control over, or it's affecting their health in a negative way. And when you start to have a conversation with them, they defend their habits, they defend their choices, they're angry that you're pointing things out, they're not ready for change, and they get really defensive.
They could also get confused or brush it off or minimize it. And I think the real key point with pre-contemplation is that it's a blind spot. It's something that people aren't ready for, aware of, or even interested in.
Yeah.
I think one of the telltale signs of this is usually when other people around the person feel that something needs to change, but that person themselves that's doing the behavior is like, I like it. I don't see anything wrong with it. I don't know why you have such an issue with it. Why do you keep bringing it up?
Yeah.
And I've had these conversations with people in my life where they are like, I genuinely don't see a problem, and everyone else is like, okay.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this podcast, you are probably not in pre-contemplation, but you can recognize that maybe some loved ones and friends and people around you are in the first stage, which is pre-contemplation, where they're not willing to make a change.
And I think it's also important for us to acknowledge that we all do have blind spots, and we all do have ways of being that aren't necessarily our best, most optimal selves, but we're comfortable there and we're not ready to do anything about it. And so that is pre-contemplation. And if you become aware of it, it might actually move you on to stage 2, which is the contemplation stage. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, stage 2, the contemplation stage, is you're starting to become aware that there might be another way. Maybe you've been looping in a behavior or a habit, and you're starting to recognize that it no longer serves you. You're starting to want to make a change in that area, and you haven't yet taken any action, but you're starting to contemplate that maybe this is an area of your life that you're wanting to do something about. So you're reflecting on it, and this could go back to feeling your emotions. Like we said, you haven't yet taken action, but you're contemplating the idea. This is an area of my life that I would like to change, and you're reflecting on it. So that's stage 2, the contemplation stage. Is there anything that you have to add to that?
I think one of the things I'll just add here is that this is not just a model that applies to people who are wanting to break bad habits. This can also apply with things like, let's say, moving house. You could be like, I'm in the pre-contemplation stage and I have no interest in considering moving. I like where I am. I'm settled. All is well. Like there's no contemplation going on. And then when you move into the contemplation stage in a situation like that, you're like, I wonder if I want to live in this area long term. I wonder if there's another place that might be better suited. And so you're starting to open up to possibilities, and that can be the same in literally any area of your life. It could be that you go into contemplation stage around the type of exercise that you're doing, or the way you do your morning ritual, or in your relationship, or the type of food you eat. It can be in anything. So it's when you start to explore what else might be possible, and then you start to go into the third phase, which is preparation. Preparation is when the contemplation has become more serious, and you're actually starting to get everything aligned for you to make that change. An example of that could be, let's say if it was a diet change, you could start researching and listening to different podcasts or reading nutrition books or working with a dietitian or something like that to start to prepare what you need. Maybe it's that you go and get blood work done because you want to know where you're at to prepare yourself for the appropriate change. Another example of the preparation stage could be that you know that you want to go traveling, and so you start saving and you're in that prep, right? It's pretty self-explanatory, that phase.
Yeah. So stage 4 is action. You've been contemplating, you've been preparing, and now it's time to take action. So again, this is where the journaling can come in, and it can be really helpful to write down your next actionable steps that you need to take. And this, again, could be around any area of your life. And taking action might feel uncomfortable. It might bring up feelings of resistance. And this is where we have to practice meeting ourselves with love and compassion and not allowing that resistance to slow us down or stop us from taking action. Because when we move to the stage, it can bring up feelings like self-doubt and fear and, oh, what's going to happen if I speak up or I take this action? How are other people going to respond? And it's important to remember that we can't control how other people are going to respond, but we can control how we respond and how we show up. And if this is your next aligned action step on your path to create change in the area that you want to create, then this is it.
The action stage is so important. And I think what you just touched on there is also really, really important for people to understand. When you start to take action, it can be terrifying. It can be really scary. It can require daily motivating yourself, coaching yourself, encouraging yourself, reminding yourself why you're doing the thing to keep you going. And like I said earlier, I think sometimes when we're looking at other people whose lives seem so amazing and exciting, we can assume that they must just have it so easy and that them taking action must be so natural and effortless. But the people who do extraordinary things are often the ones who have a go hard, don't think about it too much, just get the job done and take action type of mindset. And so once you've done enough preparation, just do the thing.
Yeah.
Another part of this is to understand that we can actually go backwards in the stages of change and then go forwards, back, forwards, back, forwards. It's like, the old saying, 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. We can take action. And then if we freak out or we get overwhelmed, we can go back into preparation or even back into contemplation or all the way back to the beginning where we're like, you know what? I tried it too hard. I don't want it. I don't want to do that thing. I can't deal with that. One example of this that's a big thing is any changes with career or relationships. I've seen people attempt to make a change, want to leave a job, go into the preparation phase of it, then go all the way into taking action to end a situation. And then when they're in the fire of it and they're feeling all of the emotions, they go backwards and they're like, actually, no, I don't want to break up or I don't want to leave the job. I'm just going to stay. And then they're back and they have to use coping mechanisms to avoid facing it. And then they get to that point where they're so in the comfort zone again that they're really all the way back in pre-contemplation and they're not looking at it. And if that's you, if there's an area of your life where you've taken some action and then you've gotten overwhelmed and you've gone back into like, la, 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 I don't want to think about it, too hard, can't deal with that, it's okay. It's a part of the process. You know the next stage. The next stage for you may be to just enter contemplation. And I'm not saying that this applies if you tried a thing and you took action and you were like, actually, tried it, not for me. I don't want that. I'm talking about if deep down, if you're radically honest, you reverted back into the comfort zone and it's eating away at you inside and it's actually still making you super unhappy, but it hasn't gotten bad enough where you're like, you know what? Doing nothing is more painful than taking action. So just know that like you can just take one step at a time and move through these phases at a pace that you're ready for. But we all have to go through it.
Totally. And stage number 5 is maintenance. So
Mm-hmm.
you've been taking action, you've been doing the thing, and now you're maintaining it. So an example of this could be you have a specific goal to get in shape, to be the healthiest version of yourself. You've contemplated the right exercise program for you, the right nutrition plan. You've been showing up and taking action and doing your workouts and eating right. And you're on the path, you're maintaining it, and you're building this new healthy habit, and you're in your zone, and this is what you're doing. And you're not letting the voice of self-doubt or fear slow you down or stop you. You're in your zone and you're getting it done. So everyone tuning into this, there's going to be areas of your life where you're already in maintenance around a specific thing. So if you can reflect an area of your life that you're in maintenance right now, once upon a time, you had to work to get there. So this is really helpful to know,
Yeah.
because if there's an other area of your life where you're maybe just in pre-contemplation stage, then know that that's where you're at, and that's okay, because so often we can judge ourselves. And like we said, going back to the original beginning of this conversation, we can look at other people and we can compare ourselves, and we can lower our vibration, and we can tell ourselves disempowering stories, and we can allow self-doubt and fear to stop us. But once we recognize what stage we're in with something, this gives us a clear model of like, okay, this is exactly where I am. This is okay. This is the stages. This is the stage where I'm at. And this is the next stage. So once you know this and then you apply it in your life, it can be really helpful to support you in creating forward motion.
Mm-hmm. So the stages of change model also has a 6th stage in some of the examples of the model. Like there are different versions of it. And in some of them, they talk about the 6th phase, which is relapse. And I think another way that we could explain this is what gets you to a certain place in your life may not get you to where you want to go next.
So true.
And we can reach a point where we're like, damn, like I took the action, I've been maintaining, it was feeling so good. How come now it doesn't feel the same? And I think it's really important for us to remember the old cliche saying of life, which is that change is the only constant. And there are seasons and cycles that we all go through. And sometimes things just start to feel off because change is needed. And it's not that the thing isn't good. It's that you are here to grow and evolve and experience life in its fullness. And there is an expiry date for some things. And there is a call for a greater challenge or a level up, where sometimes suddenly the thing that worked doesn't work. And it's going to call you back into that state of reflection. And you may go through that first phase where you're like, oh, it's kind of feeling a little stagnant, a little off, but like la-di-da, I'm going on with my life and I'm not aware that that's why. So we don't know why we're suffering at that point. And then suddenly, all the way back round, we go into, oh, I wrote the list, like Lucas said, and I'm realizing this is actually bringing me a lot of unhappiness. And now I have to contemplate, what is life trying to show me?
And for us, because this is also how we live, it might not be that it's causing us to be unhappy. It's just like we recognize that it's now time for a new level. It's time for evolution in this area of our lives, and it might be good. It might be working fine. It actually might be great. But we recognize that it's time to access a new level. So for us, on a personal level, this is about not settling for something good when we know we're capable of achieving more. When
Yeah.
we know that it's time to level up, just because it's good, we know that we can make great happen, right? This is how we live. We're always doing this. We're continuously leveling up. And we make changes when things are great. when things are awesome. But we recognize that it's time for an evolution. And we didn't come here just for good. We came to live an extraordinary life. This is what we have in our gym, dare to be extraordinary. We look at those words every single day. And this is really helpful if you're in a relationship and you're both on a personal development journey and you're growing together. Because then you can talk about these things. You can go back to that pre-contemplation stage and talk about an area of your life. Like, I know this is good. I know this is working out. But what about this? Like, what about this other possibility?
Right. So then you're in that contemplation, you're opening up
To new possibilities. You're opening up to new ideas, new potentials that maybe you haven't yet even thought of, but you're starting to entertain the idea that it might be possible to go to the next level.
Yeah. Okay. I can just imagine that some people who are listening right now are going to say, well, what if I'm ready for change and my partner isn't, or my family isn't? What if a part of the reason why I feel unhappy or frustrated or stuck is because I'm trying to grow and level up, and it just feels like I'm climbing this uphill battle and kind of dragging others or feeling held back?
Yeah, that's a great conversation. So we can use the stages of change. What stage of change are they in? So if you have a partner or a loved one or a family member that you're trying to support, and maybe it's slow, it's not working out, or there's resistance, there's pushback, maybe they're in stage 1, pre-contemplation. Maybe they don't want to change. If that's where they're at, then that's where they're at. The next piece of that is, can you accept that? Can you live with that? Are you okay with that? If you're not okay with it, then you can only take responsibility for your life. You can't change someone who doesn't want to be changed. If they're not willing to put in the work, then that's where they're at. It's up to you to decide what you want to do with that information.
And another part of this too is, if you really are committed to supporting them to create a change, then you can't just assume that they're going to be ready for action without first going through their own journey of contemplation and preparation. People have to want things from inside
For
and
themselves.
tap into their own why. And I think if we assume that everyone is going to be as ready as we are, or we're like, come on, TikTok, like I need you to be where I'm at, then we're really missing the mark in what's actually happening in reality. And then, like you said, getting honest about where people may not even be open to change at all in certain areas. And we all know someone who has put their stake in the ground and declared, I'm not changing that.
And so it is.
This is who I am. This is my personality. This is what I like. And they're not open. And if that's something that you're working with, then there is a personal decision that has to be made about how you're going to relate to that. And it may be that you surrender and accept it. Or it may be that you go, this isn't going to work for me. And so I need to come up with another way. And that doesn't always mean, oh, we have to cut ties. I can't know you. I can't be around you, or whatever the thing. Sometimes there are creative solutions that allow us to have what we want, just not in the way that we expect or would ideally maybe like in our imagined mind creation, but there is a way. And
Totally.
so I think listening to that podcast episode that we did on following the way would be a really helpful add-on if you're experiencing that right now.
Yeah, and it's also just recognizing that whatever stage you're in is what stage you're in. And if someone's in a completely different stage, then that's okay. That's where they're at. It's not a problem. That's their stage. That's their journey. It's not your journey. You can't force change upon anyone. And you also can't abandon yourself and your own needs and your own dreams to please others.
Yeah.
You have to go all the way in on your life. You came here for a purpose, and if you have goals and things that you're working towards, if you abandon yourself and you let other people slow you down or stop you from moving forward, you're only going to build resentment and be unhappy. So sometimes you have to let all of that weight go, and you have to just get on with your journey and the stage that you're in, and not expect other people to be on the journey with you, because not everyone is capable of that. Not everyone is willing. Not everyone wants to be on the journey with you. And that's okay.
Yeah. With that, I would love to make a slight pivot in the conversation to talk about our own personal, intimate relationship with our dreams and our goals and the decisions that we're making in our lives that are guided from within, right? So every single one of us has a relationship with ourselves. And every single day, it's you that you have to wake up with, and you live in your own head and in your own body. And you have to live with the consequences of your own personal choices. And for many of the people that we work with, especially, at the events and in the larger community, there is this struggle that people have inside of themselves with their own internal dialogue and low self-worth and negative self-talk, and simply waking up day after day and feeling like I can't do this. And I don't think I'm good enough. I don't think I'm ready. And I don't know how.
Yeah.
And so with that, what do you feel is helpful for someone listening who's going through that to create a shift?
The number one thing is keeping promises to yourself. We've spoken about this in other episodes. If you can keep your promises to yourself and you're in stage 4 where you're taking action, and there might be resistance, there might be self-doubt, there might be fear that's coming up, there might be self-judgment that's coming up. If you can keep your promises to yourself and not allow all of those feelings to slow you down or stop you from taking action, then that's the work. And you can break it down into small steps. It's not about overwhelming yourself. It's just about creating a list of things that you can do on the daily where you're showing up and you're doing those things and you're keeping your promises to yourself. Because so many people will say they want to do something, they'll be in that contemplation stage, then they'll move into the preparation stage and then into taking action. And then they take action, and then they stop taking action and they stop keeping their promises to themselves. Then they start to feel stuck. They start to feel unhappy. They feel misaligned.
And that's like that relapse phase, isn't
Yeah.
it? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they don't know how to move out of that. But the way out of that is to reestablish that connection to yourself, like you're saying, like it's time to recommit. It's time to recommit to myself. It's time to recommit to my journey. It's time to get into alignment, which means I'm going to have to keep my promises to myself. I'm not going to listen to that voice of self-doubt and fear anymore. I'm not going to give it energy, because when I do, I recognize that it lowers my vibration. It disconnects me from my power. I'm not going to do that anymore. When that voice comes up, I'm not going to feed it. I'm not going to give it my energy. When that resistance comes up, I'm not going to let it slow me down or stop me from keeping my promises to myself. I am going to keep my promises to myself. There's this thing that I have to do today because I've said this is what I'm going to do and I don't feel like doing it. Guess what? We're going to do it anyway. We're going to coach ourselves through it. This is the work. We all come up against this. This is how we move forward and accomplish our goals. Each and every single one of us has to face off with ourselves. There's going to be days where we just don't want to do the things that we've said that we're going to do. That's the work. This is how we move forward. This is how we create the life that we truly want to, right? By keeping our promises to ourselves, we build resilience, we build confidence, we build self-respect. We start to believe in ourselves and we start to get all of those positive neurochemicals like dopamine from doing the things that we said we were going to do. We start to feel like we're capable of creating our goals into reality. So that would be my number one thing for people listening is, where have you said that you're going to do something and you didn't? And are you doing that over and over again in different areas of your life? Because if you are, that's the thing that needs to be worked on.
I think a part of this too is to be really honest with yourself about what happened and where you may be triggered to derail. Because without a good strategy and self-awareness, we can just repeat the same old patterns again and again. And taking the time to journal and go, okay, last time I took action, this is what happened. And I derailed. I went into that 6th stage. I fell off the wagon. I relapsed. I lost my maintenance or my momentum. And I went all the way back to square one. And I felt really crap about myself. I've seen within myself, especially, that every single time this happens where I feel like I've let myself down or I haven't followed through, I feel a drop in my self-esteem. And surprise, surprise, I start to feel kind of depressed. And if I leave that and I do it more and more in different areas, I start to feel really depressed. And the way out of it, like you said, is to reestablish integrity and start keeping your promises to yourself. But if you don't know where your weak spots are, then how are you going to have a strategy in place to do something different? So for example, for me, one of the triggers to derail that I've noticed is if I have a really hard day and I'm exhausted, let's say I've got high stress, there's a lot going on at work, I've had lots of meetings or I've had to run around and do a lot of errands and there's all sorts of things going on and I'm feeling overloaded and wiped out. Suddenly that promise that I made to myself to do that workout or go for that walk or eat a certain meal for dinner or whatever it may be, or do that meditation, suddenly that feels really unappealing because I am exhausted. So that then becomes a trigger to totally derail, being tired and overloaded. And the question is, if you actually want to create a breakthrough and follow through on keeping your promises to yourself, what are you going to do when things get hard? What are you going to do when it feels uninspiring and like the last thing that you want to do? And so for me in those moments, I've lived through the cycle plenty and seen myself just completely lose sight of my goal and just go, you know what? F it. I don't care. I'm just going to do what makes me feel happy right now. I want that short-term gratification. And I've had to create a pattern interference and a new strategy, which is where the journaling and the self-awareness practices come in, where you go, okay, I am a human. I am going to get tired and I'm going to feel triggered some days. What will I do? And in those moments, it's the things for me like stopping what I'm doing or getting to the end of the day when I'm wiped out. And instead of going on Uber Eats or missing that thing that I said I was going to do, putting into place something really small that creates like a delay between me and the impulsive decision to totally fall off. So for example, it could be I'm going to do 5 minutes of breath work before I make a choice about what I eat for dinner.
Or I'm going to jump on the treadmill and get my walk in and I'm going to watch a podcast or listen to some music and then I'll decide what I'm going to eat.
Exactly. I've done that too, where I'll want to do a workout and I'm like, I feel like a brick. I can't be bothered. I'm just ready to lay out on the couch. And I'll go, I'm going to walk on the treadmill for 10 minutes, just 10 minutes. And my brain can handle that. And I'll start. And then by the time I'm going, I'm like, okay, turn up the speed a little bit. Like I'm going to go a bit faster. 12 minutes. Okay, fine. I'll go to 20. And you can push it. And I think that having a smaller way to bring yourself back into alignment and then also delaying the impulsive choice is a great strategy. But we've all got different things that we need to manage, right? So it could be that you're on the brink of reacting to your kid or your partner or whatever. And instead of doing that thing, you take a pause and you breathe. And you ask yourself, okay, tomorrow, when all of this ego is out of the way, will I be happy with this response that I'm about to give?
Yeah, well, that's why we love breathwork so much, because breathwork is one of the ways that we can regulate our nervous system and our emotions and our responses. And we can take conscious control in those moments where we feel out of control, when we feel overloaded, when we feel like there's too much going on and we're about to just seek some form of temporary relief. We're looking for pleasure because there's something there that's uncomfortable and we're looking for pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And in those moments, like you said, creating that little bit of space, like, I'm just going to take some deep breaths. I'm just going to go for a walk. I'm just going to spend some time meditating. That can support us to make aligned choices that aren't so impulsive, because really in those moments of making those impulsive choices, we are feeling overloaded, we're feeling overstimulated, we're feeling dysregulated, and we're seeking to regulate ourselves, whether that be through food or some other coping mechanism. But if we recognize that we don't actually have to turn to food or turn to that coping mechanism, that we've got ourselves, we can regulate ourselves first, and then from there we can make another choice. And whatever we decide from there is what we decide, but at least it's not coming from a place of being dysregulated and overstimulated and in a stress response. So that's one of the reasons why we love breathwork so much, because it is a pattern interference.
Yeah.
It creates that space for us to make more aligned choices.
Exactly. So we're coming closer to the end of the conversation. And I feel that a really powerful way for us to wrap this up is just to speak a little bit more about the importance of establishing nervous system regulation in our lives if we want to boost our happiness and be more courageous. Because I think for many people, this is a blind spot, and you've touched on quite a bit already, but I think we could clarify and go a bit deeper, starting with understanding that the way that we are wired as human beings is to navigate stress when it reaches a certain level of intensity by going into autopilot. And so for anyone listening right now, there are going to be areas of your life where you get stressed, upset, overloaded, or maxed out, and your whole system just automatically goes into reacting in a certain type of way. And that reaction or that autopilot behavior may be contributing to you feeling unhappy and out of control in your life.
And stuck, looping in the same old cycles.
And a part of the work that we do with Awaken Breathwork is to help people to bring themselves down in that level of intensity sooner so that things don't get worse. And I remember for myself and for you as well, being in a relationship, earlier on, before we found tools like breathwork and meditation, we would get upset and we would get really upset, like really bothered, really annoyed, really frustrated. And now, because we have the tools, it's a lot easier to recognize the feeling and do something about it to sort of bring ourselves back to a regulated, calm, clear-centered state. And I see people, every single day who feel out of control within themselves. And then they wonder why they're not crushing it in relationships, business, health, whatever the other area. And it's because they're so dysregulated that they can't perform at a high level. So I think we could talk a bit about that. What does it look like or feel like? What are some of the indications that someone might be able to recognize within themselves that they could be getting quite dysregulated and
I think it's all
out
about
of control?
I think it's about understanding the stress responses, because if you recognize that you're in a state of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or appease, then you can do something about it. But often, like you said, when we're in a stress response, because it's automatic, we don't actually recognize how we're feeling in that moment. But if we can slow things down and we can recognize, like, hold on a minute, I'm in a fight response, or I'm in a flight response, or I'm actually in a freeze response, or no, I'm in a fawn response, then we can do something about it. Like you said, we can slow things down, we can down-regulate our nervous system.
So let's give some examples of more specific manifestations, if you like, of these stress responses that would be dysregulated, because all of the stress responses have healthy manifestations, but we work with people all the time who are in an unhealthy, very dysregulated state and need to learn these tools
Yeah.
to come
So
back into their equilibrium and clarity.
Yeah, so a fight response might manifest, say you're at home and you're under stress and you speak really negatively or harshly or in a way that you don't want to loved ones or to your children or to people around you.
Like you fly off the handle easily.
Recognizing that you're in a fight response. You
Mm.
might not have known that you've been in a fight response. You might just have been like, no, this is triggering me. This thing over here, you shouldn't have done this. But the way it comes out, it comes out so harsh, or it's not coming from a place of love, or you're not centered within yourself when you're saying these things. You
Mm.
feel out of control, you feel stressed out, and that's because you're in a fight response. A part of you is perceiving a threat and you're trying to defend that threat, and you're using your voice or your actions or the way that you're handling that situation is your way of dealing with it, but recognizing that there's a part of you that is perceiving a threat, and that threat might be the way your children are acting, or the way they're talking, or the way your partner is responding to you.
And deep down, it's what you're making it all mean.
Yeah. And it's an automatic response. Your
Mm-hmm.
mind and body have just gone into this automatic fight response. So that would be the time where you need to focus on your breath work practice and down regulate, slow things down,
Mm.
and get into a space where you feel more calm and connected to how you want to respond,
Right.
not these automatic responses.
Yeah, that's it. It's about shifting yourself from automatic behavior that doesn't serve you
Mm.
to choice.
And the flight response might manifest as you just want to get up and get away. You want to run away from this challenge or this conversation,
Mm.
or your children are, playing up and you can't handle it. You just want to get away from your children.
Or you're avoiding tasks at work.
Yeah.
Yeah, very avoidant behavior is telltale flight response, feeling very dysregulated and like, I just need to get out of here.
Yeah.
It could even be social anxiety. That's a
Mm.
flight response
Yeah.
often.
So that's important because when we're in a stress response and we recognize, like, hold on a minute, I'm in a flight response, we can
Mm.
actually have compassion for ourselves. We can recognize, like, there's a part of me that doesn't feel safe right now. I'm dysregulated. Okay, I'm in a flight response. I know what to do. I can use my breath work practice to down regulate, to breathe down into my lungs, to slow my breath down. I can
Mm.
calm myself. I can soothe myself, and I can find my way back to my center.
I love that. I just want to highlight what you said. When we don't feel safe, we exacerbate our own stress.
Mm.
If you can understand that fundamental principle, you can boost your own happiness and sense of well-being so much.
Mm.
We react when we don't feel safe. We become unhappy and off when we don't feel safe. And sometimes the reason that we don't feel safe doesn't make any sense to the logical mind
Mm.
because it's really old programming. But if you can catch those moments, like you're saying, where you go into that flight response and you're like, I need to get out of here and I don't know why. Okay, I don't feel safe.
Mm.
Can I meet myself here? What might that be about? Am I protecting myself from something?
Mm.
Is there a threat that I'm perceiving? What am I afraid will happen?
Yeah.
Those are really great ways to facilitate your own breakthroughs and a lot more calm.
Yeah, then we have the freeze response, and the freeze response can manifest in so many different ways. One of them is procrastinating, not keeping promises to yourself, not feeling like you have the energy to move forward on tasks and take action, feeling
Mm.
exhausted, feeling overwhelmed, like you've set the bar too high, there's too many things to do, and instead of just getting on with creating these small steps forward, you don't do anything at all. You just feel like you just are stuck there and you're not moving forward, taking any form of action.
Mm. And it can be sneaky and subtle. Sometimes when I feel really overloaded with tasks, for example, right now we're in the process of moving and there's so much to pack and organize and do. I'm aware that if I really got identified with the story and I let it run, like, oh, there's so much to do, and I kind of went into that catastrophizing, what would happen is I would be like, you know what? I'm just going to go to bed, or I'm going to go and scroll on my phone, or I'm going to do something to numb out the feeling because it's exhausting to even think about it.
Mm.
And so we need to be mindful with ourselves of any ways that we get overwhelmed or feel unsafe in friction, tension, adversity, and discomfort in our lives, and where we kind of tap out.
Yeah, where we're shutting down.
Yeah, because as I was saying at the beginning of the conversation around our relationship to challenges and adversity, I think one of the ways that people spiral down into low self-worth is when they're confronted with the hard things, they shut down. And that's a freeze response. It's like, I can't. I just can't.
And that includes the uncomfortable conversations, speaking up, leaning into the things that might feel challenging, but they're ultimately good for you. But you go into this freeze response and you shut down and you don't move forward and take action.
And this perpetuates a weak self-image where we can start to believe that we're not capable or good enough or ready. But actually, it's just an old, outdated, automatic reaction that you've gotten blurry and confused with who you are and what you're capable of. So I think that's huge.
Yeah, and the thing with the freeze response too, this is where we can shift our breathwork practice to upregulate, to energize and activate our body. Because if we're feeling exhausted and shut down and tired, we can use our breath to tap into more energy and life force and support us to maybe move any feelings of frustration or sadness or whatever's there. We can emotionally process things and we can move forward, and our breath can help us to do that, which is different to like down regulating and slowing things down and, breathing down into our lungs. When we, use our breath to tap into more energy, we upregulate into our sympathetic nervous system, and we can breathe deeply and fully and bring our breath up to our heart space, and we can charge up and we can energize ourselves and we can move forward and take action. So that's a different approach, using our breath work in that way.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think sometimes when people think about being dysregulated, they assume, it must be frantic or really outwardly overreactive. But a dysregulated nervous system can also manifest as fatigue, being withdrawn, isolation, having no energy, no clarity, and being like, what is wrong with me? Like, I'm so unmotivated. And that's a sign that the nervous system is starting to go into that energy preservation state to protect you. So notice that, and then you can work with tools like the activation breath.
Yep. So this is like understanding your own stress responses. And once you recognize you're in a stress response and you have the awareness around it, you can use your breath to support you. Like you said, whether it's using activation breath work, which is that up-regulating, gaining more energy, or restorative breath work, which is like slowing things down, down-regulating, finding your center. All of these practices are within our Awaken app. You can find so many different classes that can support you with whatever challenge you might be navigating. And then we have the fawn response, or appease, which we've spoken about in so many podcasts, which often manifests as self-abandonment. So you could be abandoning yourself, your own desires, your own needs, your own dreams. You could be showing up for other people and giving everyone else your energy, and then there's nothing left for you.
This is huge. Okay, if anyone right now is listening and you've been feeling down about yourself or frustrated in your life or even resentful of other people, notice if you have a tendency to give. And when people make requests or have expectations of you, where you abandon what you had planned for yourself. One way that this might show up is you make a promise. You say you're going to do something that matters to you, and then the day comes and someone asks you to be there for them, or, let's go to the movies, or let's go have lunch, or can you help me move house? Oh, I'm tired. Can you do that for me instead? And suddenly you're like, okay. And instead of asserting yourself and saying what you need in order to remain in integrity with your word, you shut it down, you suppress.
You abandon yourself.
Yeah, and exactly, you abandon yourself. And that, again, is just such a surefire way to feel really depressed after a while.
And that's a stress response. It's so helpful to be reminded of that. Like, hold on, I'm in a stress response. I'm abandoning myself.
And I'm perceiving that there isn't another option in order to stay safe
Yeah.
and avoid this threat. And for people who go into fawn or appease a lot, it might be helpful to understand that at some point along the way, you've probably learned that when you speak your truth, when you set a boundary, when you say no, or when you put yourself first, you get in trouble or something bad happens. And so you're protecting yourself from that happening again, but at what cost?
Yeah. So if that's happening again, we come back to the breath. We use our practices to regulate ourselves, to regulate our nervous system and our emotions, come back to our center and make more aligned choices. So that's the key. These practices give us deeper connection to ourselves, our own truth. So we're not just living in these automatic survival responses. We're actually taking radical responsibility for how we're feeling. We're doing something about it, and then we're moving forward. And that's the key with all of this work, right? It's supporting us to move forward and create the life that we want. So ultimately, we can feel more happy. We can feel more aligned and activated and in tune with our higher selves. And this is what it's all about, you know? So I hope this conversation has supported you to recognize any areas of your life where you might be feeling stuck and giving you some form of practical structural solutions to move forward and create a change in those areas. And remember, you get to do it on your own terms. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. You can slow things down and do it at a manageable pace that feels aligned for you. It's all about just showing up for yourself and being willing to meet yourself exactly where you are. And then that's the starting point. You go from there.
I love this conversation. I know it will be helpful. I know it's pretty packed with tips and information and useful, practical pointers that can apply to real life. And the last thing that I just want to say is this toolkit, if you like, or framework that we've offered up in this conversation is applicable across the lifetime. It's not something that you do once and then you're like, oh, I'm living my dream life now and I don't need to do anything. Change is the only constant. We're always going through those cycles. It's how you navigate it. It's the level of honesty that you have with yourself. It's your ability to regulate your nervous system and allow your feelings to become feedback to take aligned action. You are so worthy. We're sending you love, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Let's go. You've got this.